Evening and welcome to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike and this is Alex coming to you from Green Dragon CVR in Woodbridge, Ontario. The only place you'll find the latest console games to purchase, alongside over 100 different kinds of Ontario craft beer. We're excited to be here today to talk to you about Sekiro. And we've got a new format of video for you I hope you enjoy today, but first we'd like to talk to you briefly about the kind of drink we're enjoying at the moment. This is called Can't Ignore My Techno. It's a dry hop sour with pineapple from Half Hours on Earth. I don't remember if we've talked about them before. They're a husband and wife team.
I think we have, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're operating out of Seaforth, Ontario. I believe we had the blueberry one before. But yeah, they're operating out of Seaforth, Ontario. Yeah, they make small batch, mostly sour beers. A lot of them fruited. Some stouts even sometimes. Recently they did a stout and a lager, but
I like
their characteristic, yeah, it's great. According to them, is just to make beers they want to drink. So if you like sour beer and you like your beer with fruit of all varieties, you know, from blueberries to even there was a lemon pie beer, check out Half Hours on Earth. I promise you won't be disappointed. Cheers, bud.
It's okay to drink fruity beer.
Pineapple beer.
It's delicious. Still beer and it's still delicious.
It's even better.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sekiro is here.
Yeah, yesterday we got together. We filmed a giant chunk of content that we were going to release on Sekiro last night, but we got to thinking that nothing we did or said in that video was particularly original in relation to all the content that's come out since Sekiro's release in our absence. And we thought a good way to introduce you to what we think is the defining, most perfect, the best characteristic about Sekiro that it shares with even the rest of the Souls games. But I think, you know, with each iteration it becomes more crystal clear, and that's definitely the case here. We want to expose you to what we think the best part about the Souls games are, Sekiro included, because we kind of think it's a Souls game.
Definitely.
Against a couple of people in the gaming media who would have you believe those were undesirable aspects. They would have those aspects be changed. So here's our video on Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Hope you enjoy it. Recently, a couple of articles appeared in Forbes and Rock, Paper, Shotgun demanding the introduction of an easy mode into the Souls games. The occasion of Sekiro caused this demand to reappear in the gaming media. I think that after hearing our arguments for why there should never be an easy mode in Sekiro on the back of these two articles published in Forbes and Rock, Paper, Shotgun in the days since Sekiro released, we'll expose to you the real unique and super appealing beauty the Souls series exemplifies, like to the exclusion of most other games, even games that try to be like it. We won't recount to you the authors of these articles or even the names of the articles. I'm sure you'll see talk of them everywhere in the gaming media. If you found this video, you'll find those as well. The first basic argument that they make is that a difficulty setting in the Souls series or in Sekiro would ease accessibility. It would make it easier for more people to enjoy the game. You know, I'll read to you a couple of quotes here from the articles. First is from the Forbes article. An easy mode would allow an order of magnitude more players to see what From is built, and yet these experiences remain walled off for millions of people for reasons I just can't parse, quote unquote. Coming from Rock, Paper, Shotgun.
So which part of that detracts from the game? Not the fact, obviously, that more people. His argument saying more people can experience it. Is that his argument there?
It wouldn't. Firstly, that more people would be able to experience it. That's the point that I'm making here. In the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article, the gentleman says that he hates boss fights in games. For himself, because he just doesn't like difficulty and challenge, but also for other people, those who aren't as good at games as he is. For whom he knows, these are not boss fights, but endpoints. They are massive, impassable obstacles between them and the fun they could be having afterwards. I guess the argument being posited is that, in some way, the difficulty of these games is tangential. It's not core to their identity, and they could be experienced as well without that. Or at the very least, the inclusion of these modes would not be a detriment to people experiencing the games as they ought to be.
Yeah, I think that really strips a lot from the games themselves.
I do too, but that's the first point that they're mutually making. Difficulty settings ought to be included to ease accessibility. The second argument, you know, that they support this with is that an easy mode would not alter the game. It would not alter the game, yeah. That's what they're positing here. It's worth saying time and again, according to Forbes, an easy mode does not have to change the core experience in any way at all, period. Playing a version of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice that had an easy mode would theoretically be completely identical to playing Sekiro Shadows Die Twice now. Etc., etc.
Couldn't be more wrong.
The idea that all you have to do is change the amount of damage that enemies do to you and the amount of damage you deal to enemies, and that this would constitute the easy mode, make the game accessible to people who don't intend to sit there and learn the systems and parse the enemy patterns, etc.
I see. I have a hard time like grasping why taking the difficulty out of a Souls game would make it more accessible or make it
The
in
argument
any
is
way
that
better
they need to
or
respect people's desire to play the way they want to play. They don't. What
doesn't
people
the
don't want to play
challenge
difficult
give you
games. Yes,
doesn't the
certainly.
challenge give you that desire to overcome?
Well, perhaps not for everybody. I guess
Maybe
this
not
guy's
for
trying to say
everybody,
that
but
they don't feel like overcoming things. They just want to see.
And that's fine.
see all the good
I'm
parts
almost
of the
at that
games.
point
Yeah.
where I don't want to overcome it because it's so hard. That's natural. That's understandable.
So they're arguing here.
I'd have
that,
no problem
that the
admitting
developers
that,
should
but
respect you by giving you an easy mode. But to me, see, respect here seems like a code word for shilling for mediocrity. It seems like a code word for detesting merit and achievements and accomplishments and, you know, even proportional justice. The idea that there's a proportionality between cause and effect, between the work you put in and the reward that you attain in its wake, between the cost of something and its quality. It seems like a denial or at least a hatred of this proportionality.
Aren't we disrespecting Miyazaki by asking him to conform his art
I believe
people's
so.
standards?
And really that's the argument that I would make
Right.
in response to this. Our counterpoint to the notion that an easy mode should be inserted into the Souls series or into Sekiro to ease accessibility. Our counterpoints have to do firstly with the nature of art, you know, like the National Post says in an article from recently, we'll link to in the description below, that Anthem developers ceding to the demands of the community is utterly antithetical to the nature of art, and we believe that that's the case here, and that's so because art exists for one purpose, to be beautiful. Accessibility, like morality or ideology, is a thesis. You could call it like a parasitic infection of the art, whereas art should exist to be beautiful. It's utterly antithetical to the nature of art to have anything but one purpose, the good of the work to be done, to make matter resplendent with beauty. To moralize, politicize, commercialize, or seek accessibility is certainly a failure of this gratuitousness. It's to impose a tumor on the body of the art, have it being, you know, its nutriment, its so-called nutriment being leached from it to serve some exterior purpose. And that's definitely the case here. It's just not how art works. It's not made to be accessible to you. It's made to be beautiful according to the form conceived in the mind of the artist, according to the logic of the form in that mind where it's born, you know? The notion that it should be modified or that it even, that concession should be considered, that it should even be voiced, you know, as a possibility is to exhibit in my mind, you know, a grave misunderstanding of what art is. It's almost to consider it, you know. Anyways, we'll get back to what I think these people consider it.
I mean,
later.
you can't be wrong because Miyazaki has said in the past, if you look at his interviews, he's pretty much said all of this himself, right?
He did, yes.
Yeah, and
secondly,
he's the mind that this is all coming from.
So firstly, to summarize, it would be utterly antithetical to the nature of art, to quote the National Post, to meet these concessions, to entertain them, to admit that accessibility is a desirable thing in art, just like profitability or a political message is desirable as the purpose or the raison d'etre or the form of the art. It's just not so.
Right.
You know, to compromise again would be to abandon the very nature of the artistic project. Secondly, you know, the nature of beauty itself. Like beauty is, you know, what we would call in philosophy an analogous feature of things. It's essentially varied. There's not one thing in the whole universe that everyone will look at and agree is beautiful, because beauty is a multifaceted thing. Everything that exists is in some capacity beautiful, but that doesn't mean it's visible to everyone.
To everybody,
the same, you know? So the very notion that everything should be accessible to everyone is strange to me.
It's almost like an impossible task.
It seems once again
It'll never work
with the nature of reality, you know?
Yeah, regardless.
There's nothing finite which appears beautiful to all finite intellects, I guess I would say. The desire to homogenize or democratize beauty. You know, this guy says that, goodness me, it's like the Hegelian dialectic in here behind arguments that, including a difficulty setting, would destroy the Soul series. But to me, it seems like he's a bit of a Hegelian himself. He wants to resolve the difference between, you know, hard and easy and this notion of accessibility. Dialectic indeed, I would say, of this rock, paper, shotgun article. Only if we take difference as contradiction does the requirement to resolve difference in accessibility, quote unquote, arise. Otherwise, the inequality of the beautiful, or analogates of the beautiful, different beautiful things, is natural. It's to be expected, as is our differentiated ability to appreciate or perceive beauty. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is there's nothing wrong that something is not for everyone because there's nothing in the universe, in principle, that ever could be.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to make of this notion. Like, it just seems, again, like... Anyways, I'll get back to what I think.
Yeah, I
think
guess
it is.
it's a flawed. It's going for the impossible, which is to please everyone, which you never will anyway. So I see what you're saying.
Now, those are
Very
two
silly.
general reasons. Like, you can make these arguments the same against somebody who wants art to be political, but I think the particular argument I would make here against these guys specifically, they're asking that art be compromised, that it be made for a reason other than itself. They're asking that the artist prostitute themselves to the cause of accessibility here. And this specific reason the journalists would have from software prostitute their art is, it's kind of embarrassing, It's the partisanship of the lowest common denominator. It's this kind of like bourgeois detestation of struggle, of grandeur, a hatred of proportional justice. Confronted with self-limitation, people like this moan and recoil, and they're disconcerted with anything beyond the boundary of themselves that they would purchase with their struggle. They didn't want to put in the time necessary to reap the benefits of the game.
Right.
In accordance with its very, design conception, There's a character in a poem by this guy, Leon Bloy. And a lot of, good-looking women in the poem and comfortable men in well-dressed, suits and living good lives don't like the presence of this guy because he looks like a skeleton and he stinks and he's falling apart. But just like Dark Souls, this character is uncomfortable to those people because he kind of translates them for the eternal, He says, "Don't you understand, my human brethren, that my unclean, my disastrous form reflects you wondrously? When the truth is known, you will understand once and for all that I am your true country. You will be most nostalgic for my foul proximity. It made you seem to live. The revulsion I inspire is the very measure of your mind's abomination." Just like struggle, revulsion, digestion, these things are from the perspective of matter. They're partial, they're instrumental. They give the bases, the opportunity to experience a fleeting glimpse of joy beyond the walls of the world. And Miyazaki himself posits the steep challenge of the game, the necessity of learning through self-incurred failure, as the basis on which the game builds the player's sense of overwhelming accomplishment upon victory. The themes of absurdity and horror, of human deterioration permeating Sekiro and Souls generally, exist alike to accentuate this kind of despair. The player feels so intensely as a contrast to his elation when he actually defeats an obstacle. I don't understand, is there something repugnant that these guys see?
Yeah.
In the notion that reward and cost and effort should be proportional?
Yeah, the more I listen to you speak about this, the more I keep thinking that all of this is carefully designed by Miyazaki to be a certain way, and any changes will disrupt the whole thing in general, right? It will just compromise his whole image, and literally, like I said in the last video we scrapped about telling a painter how to paint his painting. You're messing with the mind that has the vision and is creating everything so meticulously, right? That has to be.
Well, I think that's a general point. Again, that's totally true here. But I think the specific thing they want that painter to paint instead is particularly stinky. It's awful.
It's like the worst of the worst.
Is there anything admirable about shying away from challenge and difficulty? When did that become something we say we're proud of in the news and public?
If you look at it outside of gaming, I guess in a general aspect like that, it applies to the real world.
You would never be hired on the basis of such a characteristic.
Yeah.
This is not even, and these guys say it's an issue about elitism or an issue about not including the riffraff, but I don't think we should slander the riffraff or the casuals with this accusation that they are somehow, they don't like hard work, like this guy doesn't like it. It's not a characteristic we ought to slander the riffraffs or the filthy casuals with,
Absolutely. There are people out there who probably wouldn't like the challenge that this game presents them, and they just won't play the game, and that's fine. I'm almost one of those people, man. I'm struggling, and I don't know if I'll get through it. It's a tough game. It's brilliant.
You know what might help, man? It appears that these authors, they were briefed by the American Psychological Association on toxic masculinity, perhaps before writing. They came to detest having to work hard and struggle and to be emotionally reserved and to hold in their pain as they overcome obstacles, to paraphrase, which incidentally are qualities that would be very beneficial to completing a Dark Souls game.
Yeah.
And probably to doing anything worth doing in all life, but that's another tangent, This might explain the stupefying challenge these people claim to encounter in playing Sekiro as though dying in a video game is somehow like a particularly laborious or traumatic thing. I don't really see what the big deal is, but that's another, side note. We're going to get back to that too. To them, I would offer T.S. Eliot's advice upon being asked how those without classical education were to understand the literary references in his poems, no doubt informed by a sound grasp of the artistic process and the nature of beauty. He responded, they'll damn well have to learn. As these guys probably should do.
It's like the whole get good, right?
I think, though, the particularly odious part about these articles is that there's fundamentally it seems almost like a hatred, like Agent Smith in the Matrix, of limited creaturely existence. It's kind of peeking through here, all being kind of tends beyond itself. Finite things tend beyond themselves as they're perfected, first towards their ultimate actualities, you could say, the heart pumping blood or bees towards a hive, and finally beyond their own nature, as matter in a biological process, even as fucking lower animals evolve into higher ones, or as sensory images become the matter of an intellectual process. You need to look at your face in the mirror sometimes, and it's already changed. And when you exercise to build muscle as a requirement, you tear muscle. Learning and working makes you tired, and you need to consume calories to do so that you only have inside of you because you reaped the nutriment from other living things, like plants and animals. Even animals are perfected and reproduce and are consumed or evolved upon by higher order species. Nothing can be finite and change without digestion and suffering on the part of the changed thing. And I think that the great thing about Souls, the reason why I say it's such great art, and that's why I said, perhaps after listening to our comments on these articles, you might understand what I particularly admire about this game. I think it takes place in the primary world in this sense. Tolkien says, like we mentioned in our video yesterday, you'll never get to see. Tolkien believes that his books about elves and hobbits take place in the primary world. It's the window dressing that's changed, I guess you could metaphorically say. And I think Souls does too, in that its themes and mechanics exhibit and reinforce this transnaturality of being, this digestion and shedding that precedes integration and perfection. It sounds like Agent Smith speaking here, and that he's pissed because he's not the universe, that there's something outside of him he has to work towards. That's really what it comes across as to me. And that's just our comments, I guess, on what you'd call the form, the idea of the game. But we can move on now to what I call the matter, the gameplay, the actual parts and colors and sounds and things you do and see in the game, And I think this pertains to the argument made by these gentlemen that an easy mode would not fundamentally alter the game, which I contest it absolutely would.
Yeah, the mechanics of the game say otherwise, and all the systems that are involved. But before we move on to the systems in the actual game, I just wanted to touch upon that. I feel like it's just such a change of narrative. Do you remember when Demon Souls came out and it was praised for its difficulty as such a refreshing thing? That was, every reviewer, everyone who ever touched that game was like, fair warning, this game is hard. You will not breeze through it. It will not be easy. But if you do choose to play it and you take on the challenge, you will be rewarded. And it's such a refreshing thing. People glossed over, they just, right? And it's the narrative has kind of changed now as people come to expect the challenge, right? They go into the game knowing it's going to be challenging, and some people just, I guess, aren't up to it and don't want to,
It's also a bit clickbaity in the sense that people are probably saying this to
That's another
galvanize
thing, right?
the massive millions of fans that have now come out to support this game.
Exactly. There's a ton of people who are die hard, and they'll eat this stuff up as soon as it comes out. They love the challenge. They love the pain. They want more, right?
I think just it's people, these guys saying things that are scandalous in their ugliness. Again, I feel this is not only a request that somebody sin against their art, but also that they do it for a particularly egregious cause. And,
It's the entitlement.
Yeah, it's
like you
very
said.
strange. And I think that leads into this egregious cause, very well into why we think an easy mode would fundamentally alter the formula of the Souls games. And Sekiro, I think the form, as we said, which intersects with the matter in the gameplay. The gameplay mechanics are expressing the idea of the game. Yeah, ideally, in a good game, that's how it works, right? There's not no relationship between those two things. It ought to be correlated. And I think Souls is thematically and very explicitly, where its story is concerned, about this transcendence of certain conditions of being, of this transnaturality of being. It's thematically concerned with that, with transcending cycles of finite being in the human condition. And mechanically, it's concerned with inducing this almost player-based transcendence of self-limitation, culminating in what Tolkien called there in our previous discussion, a eucatastrophe. This difficulty, this diary try model, learning by error, is the mechanism whereby this occurs. It's the very essence of the game, according to Miyazaki. As such, an easy mode, quote-unquote, makes no sense, which he re-articulated many times, even after the release of Sekiro.
It's true. When you, think about when you picked up the controller and first started playing compared to when you're at the end. you would you not say you've transcended beyond?
It's the player that levels
right?
up,
Like
as
you
this,
yourself, as he says, the player levels up exactly.
Yeah.
You
Now,
become everything about it.
I
The
think-
way you input, your inputs in the game are totally elevated. Like you're just on another level compared to that.
all of this is to
when
say
you
that
started.
difficulty is what I'd call a proper accident of the Souls games. It's not like you don't change it as a man changes his T-shirt. It arises necessarily from the nature of the thing, As
it's born out of the systems and mechanics and the
as sight
combat.
from an eye. It's like it's a necessary property of the thing. Whereas other games may be subject to alterations in difficulty without much detriment. Difficulty arises as a necessary property of the above described essence of the Souls games, as Miyazaki called them there. To remove or ameliorate it would therefore drastically alter the game by doing a number of things. I would say by first demanding the implementation of a new core gameplay loop, or merely the removal of old gameplay elements, divorcing material component of the game from its thematic elements, essentially. It would require a total reinvention or a degradation, to my mind, of the rules, the internal logic or necessity of the formal cause of the game, like the thing born in the mind of the artist. It would be like pushing on the idea from below, demanding that it be something else, The rules or logic or the necessity of the form as it was born in the artist's mind. It would demand that we redetermine these already strictly determined ways of realizing the work of art, They depend purely on the exigencies of the work itself, its internal logic in the case of true art, not in the case of external considerations, as we just said, political, ideological, moral, commercial, consumeristic, what have you. Disrupting this would especially disrupt, I believe, the juncture of the theme and the gameplay, like the theme of the game.
Yeah, for anyone who has doubts, these games are very carefully crafted.
The theme of the game, the stories of the games are
all
about,
of it.
they're about
Everything.
Transcending this cyclical,
systems, combat,
dying state of existence and becoming more, transcending the human condition, and the gameplay is
phenomenal.
In some way, a metaphorical representation of those themes. It would be to posit this yawning chasm between the gameplay and the themes to demand the introduction of an easy mode. That's the first point against why we think the game would be altered. But secondly, it would also remove the required matter for what we called eucatastrophe moments in it go. Tolkien said we cannot deny the existence of discatastrophe, of sorrow and failure. The possibility of these is necessary to the joy of deliverance. It denies, in the face of overwhelming despair, of the evidence before you, universal final defeat, giving a fleeting glimpse of joy beyond the walls of the world, poignant as grief. That's what you look for when you beat a boss in Souls, and removing the struggle would obviate
the possibility
of that.
You died 100 times and you beat him once.
Exhibiting some kind of transnaturality, getting beyond the self, transcendence or some kind of omnipotence, the transcendence of finite conditions of being chained in material cause and effect, cannot occur without transition from despair to hope, nature to grace, imperfection to perfection, discatastrophe to eucatastrophe, These journalists deny that beauty is quote-unquote difficult, that the way is narrow, the very altitude or transcendence of the object of art itself is denied, Indeed, in its richest, most sublime forms, which remain deeply buried in their matter, in those cases, we have to work the hardest to extract them. It's universally true of anything. Again, it's just proportional justice, ingrained in the very fabric of things, that there's a proportionality between cause and effect, that when you do a certain kind of thing, something proportional to it will happen. Why would we demand that it be different here? I don't understand. But to say it wouldn't alter the game, it certainly would. And I think, most importantly, this would require that difficulty be relegated to irrelevance in the case of this game, in the same way I believe it is in a game like DMC or God of War. The fact that you can change it means that the game can change, the way you can change the color of your T-shirt. It's not any longer a proper accident of the thing. It doesn't arise necessarily from it.
No, it's just
it's a tangential consideration. It's no longer important. It would possess the irrelevance, difficulty that is, the same way it does in a game like God of War, DMC 5, or even in Destiny, to my estimation, where you just amp up difficulty with numbers.
I feel it's fine in that type of game, if that's what you're going for.
I think
I'm not opposed to difficulty levels. I don't think you are either.
I'm not opposed to it necessarily, but I would argue it's a point of formlessness in the game. Wouldn't you believe? A game with difficulty settings is definitionally a game that can be what it is or function irrespective of its difficulty. It's a game where the damage the player does, as Forbes says, and the damage the enemy do are throwaway considerations. Matter kind of escaping the control.
At will.
It's matter escaping the control of the artistic form. It can change its difficulty as a man does his T-shirt. Not only are these considerations crucial crucial to Souls specifically, the demand that they be rendered irrelevant, or the contention that they already are, is just yet another slight against the nature of art. It's indifference or its gratuitousness, the fact that it exists for its own sake. It's tantamount to asking for extra fat on a man, you know, for extra matter that the art doesn't need. I don't understand why that would ever be good.
What would you say if, let's say, the hardest difficulty in DMC5? There's 2 more up from, I think.
I mean, like, whatever the case may be, though. Not that it wouldn't be hard, just to say that, like, if the game
it would be hard,
designed,
but if it was designed for that difficulty and there was no normal, easy, or whatever, do you think it would impact your enjoyment of it? Do you think you'd like
was
it
made
more,
hard
maybe?
for the same cogent reasons, or just as a fetishistic desire to be hard? You know, like Jim Sterling dressed in a wig, touching his nipples there, like characterizing.
I guess I would say, in the way of like Souls games, that it's designed for that purpose. But then of course, then it would be good, then it would be exactly like these games. Yeah,
that's its own thing. Man.
Yeah,
it can do its own thing, sure. But I would argue that, you know, having a difficulty setting again, it renders that part of the game like it's outside the control of the artistic form. It's irrelevant to it. It's about as pointless as the color of my T-shirt or my skin. You know, it doesn't mean much, right?
No, I see what you're saying. Definitely, because given the one difficulty mode, so what you're saying is everything else,
it becomes important where you put enemies, how much damage they do. They're designed
very
to do
finely tuned and made a certain way balanced. And I see what you're saying.
I don't see how you could say that it would not change the game. It would even if you don't want to play the easy mode, they would make it so that the game had to accommodate both. Its core systems would have to work in both cases. Right. How could it not change? It would have to, necessarily.
It would, you're right.
Ridiculous, you know? Ridiculous. Yeah. And
heavy shit.
Anyways, there's deeper things we get into. But persisting with these observations, you know, this journalist says that he doesn't understand why people won't concede in easy mode because he doesn't understand how it would alter other people's enjoyment of the game. And even if we posit that they just took what Sekiro is now and jacked on an easy mode without changing anything, the point is not that my experience would be changed at all. That's not even the point. I think it's super myopic and self-concerned to think that way from the get-go. We would contend that the work of art itself is thereby cheapened and prostituted. You know, you don't want to pull threads here to reveal the gray-leveled, like, totally modern like worldview informing these articles, but you'd probably find this like shoddy phenomenalism lurking there, a reduction of reality to experience, an assertion that there's like nothing outside the text, there's no way to speak about real or independent things hiding behind the social formations of power in which we find ourselves, you know, that kind of idea. Truth not as conformity of the mind with the real, but of the mind with the subjective exigencies of life and action. Like, otherwise, how could you care or assume in others that my experience matters at all or would be affected? Like, the presupposition that that's the source of people's concern, what does that evince in them? You know? This strangely self-concerned take on what it means to play a game appeared alike in Jason Schreier's microtransaction shilling tweet back in October of last year, actually. You know, where he said, like, the biggest problem with Assassin's Creed's Odyssey's like microtransactions is that they're merely annoying. They're not like a cancer on the game, but I think definitionally they are, right? I think they definitely are.
Of course they are.
I think he definitely is a shill. Yeah.
Like you said, business considerations being injected to your game. I don't know if you enjoy that, but I don't.
I think at the end of the day, the beauty and good of the work itself would be subverted, even if no one even played it ever. If it just sat in a, in a rocket in space and nobody ever saw it again, you know?
Yeah.
This guy from Rock, Paper, Shotgun says that he thinks people are afraid of outsiders, quote, changing games to what the self-identifying us perceive as worse. But that's not really the problem. The problem is that they want to change it to what is worse for the art, actually, the thing outside the mind considered in itself. And only a wholesale denial of the human ability to even assess this can ground these kind of petulant demands for artistic subversion, I think. He says that he has a totem for a broader cause, which in this case is a games-wide revolution, including like tourist modes, essentially. And this is indeed a totem, and it's the totem for the cause, again, of the lowest common denominator. It's, truly a partisan marker of the lowest common denominator to reduce a game to the experience of the same. He literally says, like, he reduces playing a game to pressing buttons in time with a cartoon and the resultant pleasure, you know?
What a way to just completely destroy your hobby, right?
Why bother?
Like shit.
Why bother indulging in it at all?
Jeez, man.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Kill video games for everybody, eh?
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Holy.
The game is still being,
like video games.
Further evidence for this exclusively subjective appreciation for art in these journalist articles. Both these journalists, quote unquote, are in fact still playing Souls while dying constantly. Like, at the point I'm trying to make, they're still not. They can play it. They can play. They can keep doing the same thing over and over again. Nobody's stopping
playing
them.
A ton of it.
I think what they're complaining about, the game is still being experienced. Nobody's denying them that. What is
Right.
being requested here is a pat on the ass, kind of, you know? like
push
free
you through
success.
it. Like here, you
Yeah,
can
free
get a
success.
get a jail free card. We'll just push
gratification,
you right through the game.
pro
Here you go.
bono, you know, like the Souls masturbation machine edition. Like just the jerk-off edition. That's what they want. And you're capable of playing, you know, just not deriving gratification from it. You know, next we're going to hear about the consumption and enjoyment of games should be like become a province of public ownership to avoid these like That's strange stuff, buddy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's our take on why these guys are wrong about Souls, but positively I think what this means for our appreciation of Souls is that, you know, firstly, Sekiro is exceptionally good art. Its fundamental themes permeate the minute aspects of the gameplay and blossom into a fleshed out, mythological, sublime piece of like sub-creation, a sublime world, you know. Its opacity and its difficulty evinces the fact that it exists for itself, its indifference, its independence from any external good, including potential business considerations, consumer friendliness or accessibility, or moralizing or politicizing.
I can't believe Activision did not touch this game in any way we thought they would.
I agree. So on that side, Sekiro is good art from the perspective of its form, and from the perspective of its matter, its systems. These are things you'll find articulated better elsewhere, as we said, which is why we chose to do this style of video today. But briefly, you know, from the perspective of the gameplay and systems, these are fitting vessels for the themes, for the form. They're adequate metaphors for Sekiro, like for what that is in the mind of Miyazaki and his team. The concept born in the mind of its creators, you know, the gameplay, the mechanics, the stuff you see, the art, the sounds, they encapsulate this form. Not merely in the pressing of buttons in time with a cartoon character, you know, is playing a piano merely like tapping on keys, is making a movie standing in front of a camera. You know, I honestly wonder why this guy plays games at all, given this like reductionist appreciation of the medium is totally futile. Or what he thinks of his own life given that. I can only fathom, but you know, what we actually perceive is a form of movement, just like in music, not perceived in sound here, but perceived and participated in with button presses. Sekiro quests after escape from the chain of material causality of death and resurrection concurrently with the player. You do that same thing at the same time. And the intricacies of the combat and gameplay, you know, like I said, they've been elaborated on by better men than us, but we will certainly say we find them captivating. You know, it's never been so fun to just learn a rhythm. That's our take on Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice.
That was a lot of well-written, well-prepared material from you, eh?
I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know, I was a little bit busy there. It's just, that's a first. Wow.
Right?
That's new for me, guys. I hope you enjoy the game, and in the coming days, we're going to be releasing, you know, bits and pieces, we're going to call them, of our experiences with the game. You know, little shorter videos, much shorter, a few minutes long, discussing specific elements of the gameplay or specific parts of the game that we enjoyed.
Maybe some a montage of me dying.
and me. We've got plenty of those. Please consider checking out those videos, and thank you for tuning in tonight. And also, strongly consider checking out Sekiro.
Great
consider that sometimes the best experiences are purchased with blood. Your own.
It hurts, but it feels good, I promise.
Have a good night, guys.